Well, here we are in the new studio space. As you can see, this is one of the sets that I have set up behind me, and today's our first video in this studio, and we're continuing our series on the fruit of the Spirit. Today, we're talking about gentleness. Let's go. Welcome back to the channel and the new studio space. My name's Brian and this is Practically Biblical. This channel is all about sharing stories of Scripture and offering practical insights that I hope encourage you to explore the Bible more for yourself. So if you've ever found the Bible confusing or hard to understand, consider subscribing to the channel and clicking that notification bell for fresh content every week that's going to help you grow in your knowledge and your understanding of the Scriptures. Now, let's jump into today's story. Today, we continue our series on the fruit of the Spirit as we talk about gentleness. And as we get started, it's important that we acknowledge the fact that oftentimes, most of the time, gentleness gets confused with weakness. And in this video, I'll tell you why that's not the case. But to help us understand what I mean by that, I want to jump into the Old Testament book of 1 Kings. I'll tell you a couple of stories about the prophet of God named Elijah. Now, at this point in Israel's history, they had had a number of prophets, but at this point, Elijah was the only prophet of God left. The people of the nation, the king and the queen, have all turned towards other gods, towards other idols, primarily the god Baal and the goddess Asherah. Now, there were about 450 prophets of Baal alive at the time and 400 prophets of the goddess Asherah that Elijah called to account one afternoon in Israel. He challenged them to a duel of the gods, if you will, and he said, let's each offer a sacrifice of a bull to our God, and whichever God burns the sacrifice and accepts the sacrifice is the God that we will serve. And so the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah got together and they took their bull. Elijah said, you go first. Let's see what happens. So they built their altar, they sacrificed their bull, they laid it on top, and they began to party. They began to dance, to sing, to chant, to pray to their god Baal, to shout for him to accept their sacrifice. And this went on for hours, and it got to be about the lunch hour, and Elijah began to taunt them. He started calling out to them, maybe you're not shouting loud enough. Maybe he's in the bathroom and he can't hear you. Maybe he'll come back. And eventually, as the story goes, nothing happened. So Elijah calls an end to it and said, okay, you've had your chance. Now it's my turn. Elijah called all the men to pour water on top of the sacrifice, on the altar, on the sacrifice, and to dig a trench around the altar and pour enough water on it to not just soak what was built, the wood that was there and the animal that was on top, but to fill the trench. And he prayed to his God one time. And 1 Kings 18 says, immediately God sent fire down from heaven that not only burned the sacrifice, but burned all the wet wood that the altar was made out of and burned up all the water that was in the trench. And the prophets of Baal and the prophets of Asherah were terrified. The story continues, and you can read that for yourself in 1 Kings 18. But the news of what happened next got back to Queen Jezebel, and she was furious. So she chased Elijah down. She ordered him dead. And so Elijah fled, and he hid in some caves. Now in 1 Kings 19, here's where we get to the gentle part of the story. We've seen God's power. We've seen what he can do. When a righteous man, a prophet, prays, we've seen the power of God. And now Elijah, that prophet, that righteous man, was in hiding. And God says, Elijah, get up. I'm going to pass by and I want to talk to you. And so Elijah, having just experienced this power of God, was waiting for something, waiting for God to show up in a mighty and a powerful way. And it says a wind blew by the cave and a great fire passed by, but the Lord wasn't in the fire. There was an earthquake that shook the ground and the mountains crumbled, but the Lord wasn't in the earthquake. And then there was a gentle whisper that called Elijah forward. And Elijah knew that his powerful God was now showing up to talk to him in a very gentle and caring way. You see, gentleness isn't weakness at all. Gentleness is actually power under control. Did you catch that? Gentleness is power under control. It's the way Jesus lived his life. The creator of the universe, the one who had all power at his fingertips, set it aside to live a life of humility and gentleness. And it's the life that Jesus calls us to. And it's the life that we can live as the fruit of the Spirit is produced in our lives. So here's the thing. The same God, the same power, the same Spirit that burned up Elijah's soaking wet offering showed up and gently beckoned him closer. Is the same power that raised Jesus from the dead, but also allowed Jesus to stand calmly and gently in the face of his executioners. Is the same power, according to Romans 8:11, that lives in you and lives in me, those of us who follow Jesus. It actually produces greater gentleness in our lives. So here's the question of the day. Where have you seen this kind of gentleness? Not weakness, but this kind of gentleness that we define as power under control. Maybe in your life, maybe in the life of someone else. Thanks for watching this video. If you found any value in it, let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. And then consider subscribing to this channel for fresh content every week that's going to help you grow in your knowledge and understanding of the scriptures, because I believe it will change your life in the same ways that it changed mine. So whether you subscribe now, subscribe later, I invite you back next week as we continue this journey together here on Practically Biblical.